want to bring up the slides now, Charlie?
Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions of me? Okay, we're good. All right. We'll see how this goes. I retired 10 years ago, so I'm out of practice, but that you never know about that in the professor. She's probably going to interrupt. Okay. All right. So here's the field of trauma and the field of stress are huge. As Charlie says, I taught a course called Psychology of Trauma at the graduate level at the University of Oregon. So it's a huge field. And so I just wanted to introduce you to it and look at the overlap. We look at our 6 factors. The big one is stress, right? And another one, I'm going to be pulling together several of those factors, stress, social support, nutrition, tying those in together. And talking to you both personally and as a professional. I've spent a long time in this field, and I've discovered the power of connecting maybe for the first time, but reconnecting with your life. Because what we do when we're traumatized is we cut sections of our life out. Actually, Freud talked about when trauma happens, it's sort of like we leave some troops behind. And so if you've been traumatized enough, you've left a lot of troops behind. And so dealing with trauma is hard, very possible, and gives benefits you can't even imagine. So I want to offer you that hope before we even start, that it's hard, but it's very cool. Okay. Okay, so look at this picture. Could somebody turn off the lights just in the front part of the room? Leave the back lights on. I want you to be able to see John Rose. This is, we can leave the back lights on, yeah, I think so. This is at the farm where I work. I work at a farm sanctuary, and I will tell you more about this. And this is last Thanksgiving at a farm sanctuary. So what I'd like you to do, and I want you to get you involved, I want you to get you talking. So I want you to talk to the people around you, just the person next to you or 3 of you, and what are your feelings and reactions to this picture? Talk among yourselves.
Community, connection, eating. Yeah, right.
Having fun.
Yeah. Yes, everybody is having fun, talking among themselves here. So you can use your thoughts as to what you think about this and compare it with others. So,
They're cute.
okay.
They're cute.
Yeah, they are very cute. They're having a Thanksgiving meal.
Yeah, that's Thanksgiving. Okay, let's come back together now, and I'd like to hear some of your reactions. Anybody want to tell me what came up for you looking at this picture?
Oh, just as it should be. We should not be eating them. We should be feeding them or eating with them.
Yeah, we had quite a communal Thanksgiving. Any emotional reactions? I mean, everybody smiled.
It looked like they're having fun.
They had a blast. This one here, his name's Johnny Rose, and he's our supervisor at the farm. And what I've discovered is getting to know each of these turkeys. Turkeys have personalities too, and each one's different. And his wife, I call him his wife, Maura, sometimes comes after me. I don't know what she's got against me, but she comes after me. But they really enjoyed their Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, we can go to the next one. I just wanted to get you talking, thinking about it. So here's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to just sort of define what trauma is. I can't totally, and I'll tell you why, and look at the effects of trauma. Also going to look at the intersection between stress and trauma. They're very overlapping, but not exactly the same. the effects of trauma, and mainly I want to talk about how can we overcome it. And that's really the wrong word I thought about just as I started. We don't overcome it. We integrate it. And when we integrate trauma, we integrate the pain in our lives, it makes us much stronger inside. Oh, that's nice. Okay. I'm going to let you talk among yourselves for a minute. What do you think is the difference between stress and trauma? Talk to your neighbors. What's the difference? Mm-hmm. Okay, so here's the time for the quiz. What's the difference?
Any volunteers? Hold on.
Good.
Go ahead.
Well, that's both. I would say stress is what can be subjected to our everyday life. Trauma is the result of stress if it's not goes well or it's overcome.
Really, really interesting idea. Thank you. And there was somebody up here.
I was thinking that trauma is, oops,
Uh-huh.
shouted. Trauma is a high level stress that's imposed and cannot really be controlled when it happens.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Whereas stress, maybe there are ways of managing.
Yep. You're getting close. Yeah. One more over here.
I was thinking that trauma is the thing that happens to you and stress is your reaction to it.
Yeah. Uh-huh. You could be stressed out by trauma. Yeah. Mm-hmm. They're very overlapping words, aren't they? And so when I look at the chart, the 6 factors stress, it's like, what is that? So I'll show you my definition. There's the arrows. Okay. So the thing about trauma lives inside of us. We think of trauma as something that happened in the past, right? But until we can fully process it, it remains embedded in us. So you might be traumatized today by, let's say, an automobile accident. And the one thing that can happen with a bad automobile accident is amnesia for the event. And that kind of stays with you and the stress of it. So it's like, you're right. All of you were right. The trauma turns into stress if not dealt with. And we're going to talk about that. And usually stress is current. I'm stressed out right now, right? And, I'm in heavy traffic. I'm in heavy traffic, going over the Ferry Street Bridge. And that's stress. But once I get over the Ferry Street Bridge and I'm on Agate Street, the stress is gone. Now, the problem is that for us, those stress reactions don't really go away. And that's why I have up there why zebras don't get ulcers. You wonder why zebras don't get ulcers? I mean, if you look out on the plains in Africa, you watch these videos, herds of zebra, and they're very peaceful, right? They're very, very peaceful. And then a lion comes, and the lion chases one of them. And they run and run and run and run. And let's say they get away from it, okay? And so then if you watch the zebra after that, I have to put my microphone down. Do you know this one? So after the lion is gone and the zebra is safe, this is what the zebra does. Like that. It's really great to watch these videos. And then the zebra is back to grazing peacefully, right? So I actually recommend that practice. I hope I didn't look too stupid, but yeah, I recommend that practice of just, come on, let it go. For me, especially, this always comes out, I'm a very difficult driver. I can be aggressive. This is where my inner aggression comes out, is when I'm driving. And often it will take a while for me to let go of that stress of the bridge, or the stress of somebody who was rude to me. And so sometimes I'll just do this, right? And we'll talk about the effect of movement, especially of yoga, on dealing with trauma. So it's a good book too, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. But there's a lot of overlap, as you can tell. So I want to recommend the book by Gabor Mate, who wrote this first quote up here. Trauma is an invisible force that shapes our lives. It shapes the way we live, the way we love, and the way we make sense of the world. It is the root of our deepest wounds. All of us, to some degree, every person in this room has had some trauma in their early life. It might have been child sexual abuse. It might have been being bullied in the first grade. It might have been being excluded in the seventh grade. And you know, it could have been being sexually assaulted, as I was in school. So we all have these levels of trauma, and unless we know about them, and I'm going to really, really emphasize knowing about them. They won't kill you knowing about them, but if you don't, they may. And so it's these events in our lives where we leave the troops behind. We don't even know ourselves because we buried our pain. We dissociated. That's the big word for forgetting. We don't even know about it. We hold it in our bodies is one of the big things that we do. Tight shoulders, tight stomach, all of those things, we hold it in our bodies. And it has effects on both body and mind. I'm always interested to see what my next slide will be. Sometimes I forget. So here we have the idea of defining trauma. And this is where I get a little bit academic. And if I get too academic, just raise your hand and I'll skip the slide. Trauma came into the field of psychiatry actually several times in this century, but it entered our current diagnostic system in the early 1980s with DSM-3. And that's the first time we named PTSD. All of a sudden, we had this post-traumatic stress disorder. And I want to emphasize to you, it is not a disorder. Okay, lots of people, especially in the military, they want to call it post-traumatic stress reaction. It's not a disorder. You need the diagnosis to get treatment if you're going that way, but it's not a disorder. Okay, it is a normal response to abnormal circumstances. And so we had this big idea that trauma was going to war. And then, you know, it came into the system and we started talking to people and we found out, oh, perhaps child sexual abuse is a trauma. Perhaps living in domestic violence is a trauma. And so the definition of trauma keeps expanding. But it's basically being exposed to overwhelming life circumstances. Now, who gets to say what's overwhelming, right? I think it's a very, very personal decision. And if you get nothing else from this talk, if I'm boring you totally, you get nothing else from this talk. If you have an emotional reaction to an event and somebody tells you you are overreacting, tell them to shut up, okay? If you have an emotional reaction to an event, do not tell yourself you're overreacting. Don't ask yourself what's wrong with me. Ask yourself, what happened to me? How can I make sense of this emotional reaction? One of the big parts of my talk today is I want you to make friends with yourself. And if you're saying, what's wrong with me? This is terrible. I was overreacting. Stop it. Have you ever seen the Bob Newhart clip? Stop it. Okay, go to YouTube, look up Bob Newhart, stop it. That's his view of therapy. Stop it. But he says it much louder and many more times, yes. So if you find yourself saying to yourself, oh, I'm overreacting again, stop it. and just say, okay, how can I understand this reaction? What happened to me that I'm reacting this way? So that's the main, I could go now. So that's the main thing. But there's another thing I want to stress in terms of this defining trauma. We think about it as somebody's assaulting me, or there's a car accident, or there's a war. But there's another kind of trauma, which we call relational trauma. And we forget that there are so many dimensions of trauma. There's this trauma that causes anxiety. This big thing happened. But much of the trauma in our lives is quiet trauma, and we call it betrayal. Right? Husband cheats on a wife. What we found in this book, Blind to Betrayal, I put it up there because I wrote it with my friend Jennifer. What we found in our studies with social betrayal is that if you compare people who were traumatized as a child by strangers versus people who were traumatized as a child by people in their family, like parents that were supposed to take care of them, that causes much worse effects because you have added betrayal to what is trauma. And we've done hundreds of studies at this point. So we think of that, this person left me, or this person cheated on me. Why am I reacting that way? Because that's big. That's big, and it's shown that that can have bigger effects than somebody assaulting that you don't know. So, and we're often, that's what we call our book, we're often blind to that. We don't think about it. We don't think it has an effect. So I want to really emphasize that to you. And so trauma has different effects, and it depends not only on the severity, but the age at which it happens. So the next one, we're going to talk about the ACE study. How many people have heard of the ACE study? Raise high. A few of you. Okay, ACE study means Adverse Childhood Experiences. And it started in 1995. They're still working on it. And they looked at over 17,000 people in the ACE studies.
Wow.
And what it did is it helps us really understand how prevalent trauma is, how prevalent childhood trauma is. And so go to the next one. I'll show you their original list of adverse childhood experiences. Physical, sexual, or verbal abuse. So notice verbal abuse counts here. Physical or emotional neglect. Separation of divorce or the parents. A family member with mental illness. A family member addicted to drugs or alcohol. A family member who is in prison and witnessing a parent being abused. So look at that list and you could find your ACE score of how many you've had. I had 2 of them. And I'm sure I'm not going to ask you, this is a very personal thing. There's people in this room that have 4 or 5. And so what they did in the study, it's a very simple study. People came to Kaiser Permanente for medical help, and they asked them this questionnaire. And here's what they found out. They found that 67% of adults have at least 1, which isn't surprising. 12% has 4 or more. And some people that I have worked with have 8. So it's a huge thing. And the thing that they looked at that had never been looked at before is that the physical health outcomes, well, also mental health. So you can go to the next one. So this is just an example. If you Google ACE studies, you'll find a million. But so with an ACE score of 4 or more, 4 times the likelihood of developing depression, 12 times the risk of suicidality, 7 times the likelihood, and this is where our addiction comes, that alcoholism or abusing drugs. And with 5 or more, 7 to 10 times the likelihood of using drugs, and 3 times the risk of misusing prescription pain medications. And these are just, there's lots of, you can imagine with 17,000 people to begin with, they have many, many results. But what these studies show is what happens to us mentally, socially, relationally, has an effect on our physical health. And this wasn't even thought of before that. Okay, so I'm going to stop here for a minute and ask if there's any questions or comments. Yes. Yep. Good, we have a runner.
They always talk about the drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, that's a very funny one to measure, and I don't believe that they've measured that. Do you know? Is anybody looked at? I didn't see it on the current study, but they have looked at obesity, and yes, obesity is on the list as well. Yeah, that there's a higher rate of obesity, which probably includes that. But good question, thank you. Yeah, Clarice. Yes, this came after, Clarice is referring to another study which looked at stress, but this is much after the home study, yeah. Anybody else? I just take a deep breath, okay? Yeah. All right, so the effects of trauma. And we're going to start with the brain. Have you talked about the hand model?
About what?
The hand model of the brain?
Yeah.
Oh, are you ready for this? Okay. Okay, so I found this. Dan Siegel talks about this. He's a psychiatrist. So I want you to imagine this fist, okay? Right, and this fist is my brain, the sideways view of my brain. Okay, got that? All right, so if I flip my lid, inside the brain, we have the thumb, right? And then down here, we have the wrist, right? So the wrist is kind of like the brainstem. That regulates basic functions like breathing, breathing, basic metabolism. It's very, you need it to stay alive. Okay, it's been called the reptilian brain, which is as good as any. And then we have the thumb, and there really should be two thumbs because it's bilateral, which is called the mammalian brain, or the limbic system. And in the limbic system, we have a couple of things that are very important: the amygdala and the hippocampus. The amygdala is involved in our emotional reactivity. And so if you damage the amygdala in animals, you either get complete passivity or rage reactions. And so this little amygdala, and what happens when we're traumatized as a child is the amygdala gets charged. But the problem is the amygdala doesn't speak English. And so you have a big emotional reaction. It doesn't have language to it because the amygdala is just firing. And it is associated with the hippocampus, which is associated with memory. And so people with severe memory loss have smaller hippocampi. Okay, so those are here in the midbrain. And hippocampus holds both primarily visual memory, and then you have over the top of it the cerebral cortex and the prefrontal cortex. And what the prefrontal cortex is supposed to do is, that's our rational brain, right? And it's supposed to talk, and it's supposed to understand things, it's supposed to be rational. And it's very, very hard when that little amygdala in the limbic system is firing, really rational, right? But you don't understand it because it doesn't speak English. And so I have worked with people who talk about the next thing, that they're getting close to their trauma, and they either fly in a rage or they freeze. They just shuts it down. And I'm going to get to this more later, but then there's a vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, that is a really important one that interacts with our gut and our heart and our gut, where there are neurons, plenty of neurons, not as many in the brain as in the brain, but plenty of neurons. And so this stuff, the amygdala is really upset. We can't do anything about it. So we hold it in our body in terms of tension, or we shut down. And I don't know, I tend to be the shutdown kind of person. So if I'm in a really bad situation, I tend to just withdraw. I can't deal. And unfortunately, my daughter, when she gets in a bad situation, she's the other way, right? And she goes on. She fights. I do flight, Everybody knows the fight or flight reaction too. Oh, we forget the freeze reaction. So the sympathetic nervous system goes into overdrive, you're crazy, or it goes into complete shutdown and you're frozen. You can't deal. And there's a great book, and I'm going to have Scott add these to a website called The Body Keeps the Score, which is talking about childhood trauma and how it's stored and where it's stored. Bessel van der Kolk's, he's a very cool guy. You can get it on Audible. Also,
Audible, that's what it's in.
yeah, Audible, the subscription. And also, you can find a lot of this stuff on YouTube. Bessel has a lot of good interviews. Bessel van der Kolk. When my friend Jennifer and I first started teaching trauma, his first book had just come out, Psychological Trauma. And Jennifer and I couldn't figure out whether he was a man or a woman with a name like Bessel. But now he's become pretty famous. And His Body Keeps the Score, so the classic book in the field. And from that comes a number of somatic therapies, things like that. So the body keeps the score like that. So there's this trauma that gets in our brain gets messed up, our body gets messed up, and then this spreads out, we have this emotional reactivity. And I don't always read the books that I recommend, but I like the title. Like one of my favorite books is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I've never read the book, but it's a great title, right? And this book, The Invisible Lion, which I think is a great metaphor. Let's say you're running away from a lion and people are around you. I don't see the lion, right? The lion's your trauma, right? You're going crazy about something and everybody's like, well, but you're running away from an invisible lion. And your amygdala is going off. And again, it's not an overreaction. It's something to understand. And then what we do, especially, we do it all through our lives, but especially as young people and developing people, we develop false selves, right? You want to get approval, don't you? And you want people to like you. And especially if there's not enough parental approval, you're going to actually develop something that they will accept. For me, it was I had to be smart. I had to get good grades, right? For some people, it's the opposite, that they have to run away. But we always have to kind of shape up and form these false selves in order to fit in with our family, with society. To a certain degree, that's really normal. To a certain degree, right now, I have on a false self. It's my university professor self, right? And I'm not telling you, I'm not presenting the way I did to my daughter earlier today. So we all do that. There's a normality to that. Jung talked about the persona that we all develop. But what happens in cases of traumas is that false self is just such a tiny slice of who you are that you can't know who you are. And the other thing that happens, and this is maybe other people have had this experience. Have you ever done something and you hear this thought coming in and says, God, you're stupid? That ever happened to anybody else?
Yeah.
Or you'll never be able to do that. Anybody do anything like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody want to share any of their? I'll have to tell you my favorite one came up a couple years ago. I'm lying in bed at night, and I woke up, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm lying there. It's not a big deal. Sleeping, I'm a very talented sleeper. I sleep well, but I woke up and this thought comes in my head: you're just a useless old woman. That's what my thought was. You're just a useless old woman. And I thought, that's crazy, right? Because I have done my work. I didn't have to believe that thought that came into my head, and I know where that thought came from. It came from our culture, who wants to tell me that. But these thoughts come in. You're stupid. You'll never be able to do that. I can't believe you did that. I hear that one a lot when I'm driving. Well, I probably mean, but so really, and the other thing this develops out of You notice I'm not asking you what your trauma is, because there's a lot of shame around it. We all carry within us a certain amount of shame that I don't want anybody to know that. I don't want anybody to know this. And maybe it's so much I don't want myself to know. And so we kind of go into secret. And one of the reasons we didn't know about child sexual abuse for years and years and years is nobody talked about it. Nobody talked about it up until about 1970. So there's a shame and secrecy, and that inner critic is there to kind of keep us quiet. No, you don't. You shouldn't do that. Shouldn't do that kind of thing. Okay, next one. Question? Good. Oh,
Well, a comment actually. So when these kind of thoughts pop in, or their thoughts that pop in that connect back to a trauma that you yourself or someone has experienced. I was had a counselor tell me the emotion that you feel, it was the 10 seconds, it's real, and then let it go. Let it go. And I find that to be like, processing the trauma is a lifelong thing, because if you're human, you're going to get these thoughts occasionally.
exactly.
So
Yeah, very good. Yeah. And I think another important thing about what you said is the emotion that comes with it is not bad.
So it's real.
It's very real, and holding that emotion in like this, will harm you. But feeling it won't.
20 seconds, let it go.
Yeah. Sometimes for me it's longer than 10 seconds, but yeah. But I'm a slow learner. So any other questions? I'm going to change the word integrating the trauma. Any other questions about that? Have I bored you terminally? Okay. All right. So, and I'm going to emphasize this over and over, that integrating trauma is possible and happens all the time. Now, lots of people are going to say after this talk, or a few people are going to say, but I can't find a therapist. All right. Therapists are hard to find these days, and I know that's hard. And yet, it's nice to have a therapist. That's great. But if you just need one safe person in your life to process things with. And there's a field in therapy called co-counseling, where people actually take turns being a counselor to the other person. If you can find good therapists, that's good too, but it's not entirely necessary. But here's the thing, and that is creating a sense of safety and feeling that you're safe inside your own skin. And nothing can happen until you're safe inside your own skin, and for body and mind. And Judy Herman wrote, after a traumatic experience, the human system of self-preservation seems to go on permanent alert, as if the danger might return at any moment. In the field, we call that hypervigilance. And many of my clients have told me, that's not hypervigilance, that's just vigilance. That's a reaction that makes sense given what happened to us. I learned a lot from my clients. They taught me, I'll give you another example coming up. But our system is on permanent alert. And let's say even it's a stressful fender bender that you had last week. It may be your system's in slight bit of alert from that. The next thing's going to happen. I'm going to be tense when I drive, and then we can see the kind of problem that gets us into. Do the next one. I'm always interested to see what the next one is. Okay. So, given what we talked about with stress and trauma and other in terms of this wheel here, where trauma comes in, I see a special importance on stress management and social support. And as I'm going to say, as I'm going to tell you about nutrition as well. So those three parts of the wheel are the ones that kind of interact with each other. Okay, so creating a sense of safety in the body. And Charlie talked about this last week. Isn't this a great graphic? Yeah, mindful or mindful. I thought that was And that's what it is. I love that graphic because being mindful is you're aware and open to what is happening now. In times of trauma and stress, we're often way behind ourselves. We're reacting to something that happened last week or 30 years ago. And so this mindfulness and breathing. And Charlie talked about meditation, and I think for a lot of people, meditation is kind of a scary word. But if you can think of mindfulness, and mindfulness is really learning to observe your own inner landscape. Often we get carried away by it. So anybody here tried to meditate? Who here has tried to meditate? Okay. Do you have my experience where you sit down and you breathe a few times and then you realize you're planning your grocery list? Okay. That's what happens. And then I'm sitting there and I'm breathing, and then I realize I'm planning my talk. And that's what happens. That's normal. But mindfulness is this coming back to the now. So I'm sitting there, I'm breathing, I'm meditating. I have a meditation cushion, right? I'm in my cushion, I'm sitting there, and off I am. I want to make kale white bean soup today. So I'm planning what I have to go to the store for. And instead of saying to myself, oh, come on, stop it. You gotta stop. You can't do that kind of thing. All I do is say, breathe, back here. It's sort of like, it's been likened to trying to train a puppy. Ever tried to train a puppy? Right? Off they go. Okay, come back here to the puppy pad, right? Come back here to the puppy pad. That's what I never thought. That's a weird example. Okay, so you think of keep bringing your mind back to the puppy pad, so it doesn't pee over in that part of the yard, right? So, and it's a very gentle thing. You don't give it energy. If you start yelling at yourself about not being able to meditate, guess what? You can't meditate because you're yelling at yourself about not being able to meditate. And so it's a very gentle. Okay, I'm off planning. Okay, here I come back. Breathe. And Charlie did this last week, learning to breathe. Just an inhale. And then a very slow exhale. Andrew Weil teaches the 4-7-8 technique. And you can look that up. You breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. That's a nice one. Or you can get a breathing app. I have an app called Birrell, I think, that shows this little ball getting bigger as you breathe in and then fuller as you breathe out. We have all these kind of apps that can really help us. And then you're breathing, and then, oh, wait a minute, I forgot. I'm coming back here. I'm coming back. The puppy's being trained. The other thing it's called in Buddhism, of course, is the monkey mind. And mine's more like a monkey mind. Puppy, yeah.
I always wondered, when you do the 8 breathing out, breathe out through your mouth open or shut or does it matter?
I'm a yoga instructor, so I think your mouth should be closed. I've seen people say breathe out with your mouth open, but breathing out for 8 with your mouth open, I don't think so. I think all breathing should be through your nose. But that's my yoga training. So, and I think all calm breathing should be. And there's all kinds of breathing techniques that you can watch on YouTube. So to become this sense of bring it back, that's all. And you may bring your back, you may decide I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. And you may bring your mind back 100 times. You've done good, right? You've started training that puppy. And you give it reinforcement. Right? You say, good puppy, yeah, good mind, that's good. I got you back, you're doing it, we're training. So, all right, so the next one. Okay, this is where I talk about vagus nerve. In psychology, there's a theory called polyvagal theory. You guys learn that too? Polyvagal theory? Oh, really? Okay. There's some controversy about it, but the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. There's 12 of them, and most of them go from the brain to the brain. But the 10th cranial nerve has a lot of connections in the brain. It comes down to our heart, and it comes down to our gut. And we produce, anybody here neurotransmitters, right? We produce serotonin in our gut. We produce it in our heart area. We produce it in our head. These are not separate things. They're the same thing. And so it's called the enteric nervous system. And so there's this interaction between body and mind. But it's all the same thing. We use these words, but it's all the same thing. So let's say, and it's a two-way street. This is the important thing, efferent and afferent nerves, both ways. So let's say you're driving across the street bridge and you're me, and you get really upset. So the brain goes like this, that person cut me off, how could they do that, right? And then it says to the gut, things aren't okay up here. How are things down there, right? And if my gut says, hey, we just had kale white bean soup, things are good down here, then it comes back up and I say, okay, I can get over this, right? I don't need to do anything to this person, okay? I've actually gotten much better than I used to be. But let's say your gut's upset. Maybe my head's all upset because somebody cut me off. I check down here and my gut says, things aren't so good down here, you just had a cheeseburger, right? And that comes back up because my gut's not doing well. It's having trouble digesting IBS, whatever happens when you have a bad diet. Comes back up here and my mind says, oh my God, it is terrible, right? So you get this whole feedback thing going. So we can intervene. This is why nutrition had some frustration when I was being a therapist, because nutrition is really important. If you can get your gut in good shape, if you can get your heart in good shape by having good and strong relationships, then when your brain freaks out, it checks down here and it says, oh, okay, guess we can get through this. Okay, so that's an important thing to remember. Any questions about that? There's a whole bunch more to polyvagal theory, but that's a general introduction. Okay. Next? No? Okay. The next one is safe movement. And I know we're going to have to talk about that next week, about exercise. I'm going to come at it from a yoga perspective because I'm a yoga teacher and a long-time yogi. Doing yoga, and Bessel van der Kolk has written a book about yoga and healing from trauma. Doing yoga doesn't mean you put your head on your knees and do a back bend or stand on your head. Okay, that's not yoga. Yoga is, it starts with simple body awareness. Any yoga class worth its salt will start with, do a body scan. And find out, just pay attention. Okay, for a moment here, pay attention to your feet. How are your feet doing? And then maybe you come up and you pay attention to your lower legs. And maybe you've got a cramp in your knee, so you pay a little bit of attention to your knee. And on up, your calf, your thigh, your butt's probably sore by now, right? Yeah. These are terrible chairs. and you feel that up. And what about your stomach? How's that doing? You know, and maybe your low back and the chest area. And where are your shoulders? Are they up around your ears, where mine tend to reside? What about the neck and the jaw? And the space between the eyebrows? And so you begin with this very gentle awareness. And now pay attention to your breath. And notice the air coming in through your nostrils, cool going in, warm going in. And pay attention to the rise and fall of your breath. Okay? Okay, I didn't plan this, but everybody stand up as you're able. We're going to have a simple little yoga class here for a minute. Okay, stand with your feet directly under your hips. And become aware of your bottom of your feet and rock forward on your toes and back on your heels. Go forward and back, and then find the very center of your foot, like the arch of the foot. And think of this energy coming up the arch of your foot, through your knees, and up through your pelvis, and up to the sternum. And the sternum rises and the shoulders fall. And there you are standing and breathe. Okay, and then put your hands at your side. I don't know if we have, I guess we'll bring it up at front. And then on an inhale, bring your arms forward and up. So inhale, and then all the way up. And you just stand here and pay attention. Can you pull your shoulder blade down to back? Where is your shoulder? If your shoulder's stuck, where is it stuck? Not trying to stretch like crazy. It's like, where is it stuck? Oh, let me explore that. Oh yeah, that's when the truck hit me when I was on my bike, right? That did happen, by the way. Okay, and so then you pay attention. Inhale, reach, and exhale down. Okay, and one more time. Inhale up. Deep breath in. Hold it for a minute. Okay. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? How do you feel? First of all, your butt feels better if you're standing up, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, you can sit down again. Okay, so when I'm talking about this gentle movement, and when I teach my yoga classes, it's like this too. Just say to yourself, look how far I went. Yeah. Given what happened to me, like this shoulder RD is not so good because this is the side the truck hit me on. And if I'm going to make this shoulder do what the other one is, I'm going to hurt me. And so it calls for this real deep inner awareness and this very gentle movement. And you can find yoga classes. Eugene Yoga has them here at gyms. Be careful. There's a lot of yoga teachers out there too. But the important thing is just gentle, sweet movement where you're paying attention, exquisite attention to the motion. Okay. So we have safety in the mind and the gut. Next one is creating a safe emotional space. This is the hard one. This is where it gets hard because we're very reactive. Our amygdala there in the center is yelling, and we're not knowing exactly why. So we all have this internal critic, right? And it comes up in many, many ways. Now I have to tell you, one of my clients came up with the best strategy ever, much better than I could have ever come up with. She named her internal critic, her inner critic. I think there's nobody here that's name. She didn't like the name Joan. So she named her inner critic Joan. And we went from, I feel terrible about myself, I'm depressed, I'll never get anywhere. She would come in and say, you'll never guess what Joan said this week. And then I would say, what did Joan say? Well, Joan said that I'm never going to make it. Did Joan really say that? Is that a very nice thing to say to anyone? So we were really able to, so I always think of Joan. I'm sorry if anybody's named Joan, but you didn't like that name. And then all my clients started naming it. And once if you can name it, you can tame it. So so when that thought came up, you're a useless old woman, I could have said, if I were my client, Joan, it's okay, cool it. But don't say, Joan, shut up. Because these internal critics, what we find out after a while, if we explore them, is they're trying to help us. Right? I know it seems weird, but especially if we have abusive parents, this inner critic is trying to help us, like making us better. You're stupid, so show that you're not stupid, kind of thing. And so once we can understand them, they really, really, really can lose their power. And then this next one is really hard. We have pain. We have pain in our hearts. We have pain in our guts. We have probably pain in the limbic system if they have nerve receptors for that. And it's hard because you, quote, overreact. You're sad about something, you're angry about something. And as long as you think you shouldn't be, then you're in trouble. But if you can find a place that's safe to feel, just to feel. I've had clients tell me, many clients tell me that if I feel this, it will kill me. And I said, Nobody has died from feeling things. Never. But they do die sometimes of not feeling because everything's stuffed. So, and this is where, again, this without judgment. So why did I do this? That's stupid. No, that's just approaching it without judgment. And another important concept is this thing called window of tolerance. We all have different windows of tolerance. Some of us can tolerate lots and lots of, well, if you look at physical pain, some people like physical pain, I'll feel it. And some people, like my daughter, it's like, oh, I have pain here. Oh no, so, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with any of those, but we all have these different windows. And people who are first beginning to deal with their trauma have very small windows of tolerance. And it's very important not to push those windows open, because then you just re-traumatize yourself. So you find situations that you can deal with. I can deal with this coworker when they're upset, but I can't deal without them, right? How can I manage it so I stay within this window where I can tolerate the emotion, or I can tolerate the internal pain? Because it is painful coming to terms with stress and trauma. And so, any questions on that? Just those interesting concepts. So you can say to yourself, oh, I'm stupid, or I'm crazy, or you can say, whoa, I just stepped outside my window of tolerance right now. And I need to get back inside of it. I need to get back in this place where I can function. And sometimes it's a very small space. And then as you work and you become aware and you deal with this, it gets bigger. Okay. Wonder what's next. Okay. So again, we're back to this idea of connection, which is really what I want to emphasize. It's creating this sense of safety, external and internal. So listen lovingly to discomfort. Don't ever tell yourself, I shouldn't be feeling this way. Don't ever, that's your income. You have your feelings. It's like, I shouldn't be feeling nervous about talking to this group. Well, I'm sorry, I do, right? And then as soon as you allow it, there's another old saying in psychology that's what you resist persists. So as long as you're saying, I shouldn't be depressed. Well, that's pretty depressing because you are depressed. And so I'm going to try to pretend I'm okay. It doesn't work. But if I can allow myself to just feel depressed, there's a spiritual teacher online that calls it deep rest instead of depressed, because we need a deep rest. And there actually, oh, here comes my inner professor, I'm sorry. But there used to be a treatment in Japan before we took over their psychiatric system. Whereas if you were depressed, you went into a hospital and you were totally taken care of. You weren't allowed to get out of bed. You were fed. You had to rest deeply. And people would go in, they're depressed, they would just spend this time there. And pretty soon they start going walking crazy because they're bored. And then they start to get up. And it was pretty effective for treatment, but of course, that doesn't fit in our modern system at all. And begin to learn to support yourself with loving thoughts. So, hey, I did good today. That's okay. Many of us were told as children that, oh, you're being narcissistic, or don't only think of yourself. I'm saying think of yourself. There is such a thing that's called healthy narcissism. And so if I teach a yoga class, I can go afterwards and say, okay, I did that good. I did that part of it good. But maybe that other part I need to rethink how I'm going to cue that particular move. Rather than, oh my God, I'll just never make a good yoga teacher. Maybe I should get more training or whatever it is. So just have a loving thought toward yourself. It's okay. That maybe you can just say to yourself, I love you. Right? There's some people, I've never practiced this. Look in the mirror and just say, I love you. That's okay. Nothing wrong with that. I wish you would all go home and do it and report back next week. And then moving your body like we did with the yoga, with presence and kindness, never pushing into it beyond injury. What we find in yoga is that if I have a student in my class with really severe knee arthritis. And what she has found is that she'll push her knees to a certain amount, and her range of motion has improved by 100%. But she didn't push beyond it. She just pushed into the discomfort. Her window of tolerance would hold it for a bit and come out of it. And what we found is that arthritic, I don't know what happens anatomically, but arthritic things begin to break up. And so you get more range of motion. So, and nourish yourself with whole foods, right? Because then when your mind gets upset, it can go to the gut, and the gut can say, we're cool down here, right? And then the mind can say, okay, I can deal with this, whereas maybe it couldn't before. And pamper yourself, right? I love sauna, and so for my birthday, my daughter got me a sauna blanket, and so I just call in this big old hot sleeping bag sometimes. That's what it is a big hot sleeping bag, and you get warm, you know, and that's a treat. That feels really good to me. I've been plant-based long enough that I made a killer white bean and kale soup the other day, and that feels good to me. That's my treat. And I love cooking, so I can do that. Any other ideas about how people might treat and pamper themselves?
So, yeah, I'm not sure if it's treating camper, but or talking to the inner critic. But I think it's like helpful to keep kind of track of successes and remind the critic of your success.
But you don't want to fight with the inner critic.
No, I'm just saying, like, but I use this because I get both intellectually challenging positions sometimes. Because I work at part of my time to actually make this patent lawsuits. Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would never do that. Yeah.
Well, and then also like physically, challenging outdoor activities, and like extremely hard ski run. Everybody gets that little like and then you're like, dude, I can do this. And literally, like, I actually say it sometimes out loud, and that thought goes away 3 turns, and then off the races.
I love it. Anybody else got ideas about?
So I have 2 actually. So I do a lot of treating camper myself. I think
Good.
A couple years. So I'll definitely say like 9 years ago, whenever I achieve anything, I tell myself, I'm like, you know what? I deserve a secret workout right now. So like I go to the gym. That's because
That's a reward.
Yeah. Well, just a segue to taking care of your gut. My entire operation in nutrition and fitness. So everybody else I'm listening to deserves food. So that's what I've been practicing for almost 10 years. Also, I take a lot of that. Also pay that high water for the heart, but my vertical take a lots of that with lavender. I'm talking about 4 times a day. And what that does is the water just sit.
I'm a heat person.
And it's something about any stress or trauma you have, it's a top like stuff and you evaporate.
I love it. That's great. I'm a shower person myself. I like to wash it down the drain. Anybody else got ideas about this dealing with this? Yeah.
My body's working.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
There was this thing called fishing.
big class in there. It's looking one thing.
Mhm. They'll be back in the back, this one.
I'm sure it was not long. My pets provide so much comfort. And we have two older cats and one of them has a child been coming in the morning. I just get in bed with him, sit on my lap in bed and just my belly against his body. It's like a meditation without having to go home.
All right.
I've been home and I just give into it like right now.
Right.
And it's so
I do that with my cat. I have an orange cat named Benjamin Fishstick. Yeah. 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 I heard a long time ago that petting an animal will lower your blood pressure. I don't know if that's true or not. Yeah. Oh, at the same frequency. Okay, interesting. Yeah. All right. And I think it's important. This brings up some ideas of finding ways to be mindful. Maybe it's fishing. For me, I do ceramics. And there's something about having that wheel going, having that pot center. You know, that's the same thing. And everybody can find that thing. We've all got them. What about rewards? What kind of reward? We don't want donuts now. You know? What's a good reward? A hot bath. I mean, some of the things we were talking about, hot bath, going out fishing, that could be a reward. A workout can be a reward. You know, right? Whatever. Each to their own. Any ideas about rewards that are non-food? Have what? Yeah, go someplace you haven't been before.
You know, the cost of like not going out to eat at a certain restaurant or whatever, we could afford a massage.
Aha.
And massage is like
That's
amazing.
good, yeah.
Yep. The massage. Yep. Yeah. Just walking in nature. And I go back to the graphic I had of being mindful. If you walk through the park thinking about your stress at work, or you walk through the park just coming back to your breath, you can really get in touch with it. So next one. Okay, and then here's what happens is self-compassion flowers into compassion for others. Once you can learn, you can't love anybody else until you love yourself, not really. And being able to feel your own pain loosens the grip of this inner critic, loosens the bond of shame. And then connection with yourself deepens your compassion and ability to connect deeply with others, the natural world, and animals. Next one. This is me. And I'm working at where I started, I'm working at a farm sanctuary. The big black cow is Romeo. Romeo is the tallest steer in the world. He was on the news. There's going to be a celebration in Cresswell next week. The city of Cresswell has adopted Romeo. He's 6'4" at the withers. He and his brother Milo, who's the one next to him, the black and white, were rescued from veal crates when they were babies. Veal crates. Because baby males in the dairy industry, they don't need them. You know, they just need a few for breeding. So they put the baby males into veal crates and slaughter them when they're babies. That's what veal is. It's
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so Romeo and Milo were rescued. And then that's Charlie Brown, the one next to him. And down here in front, we have the goats. That's Yimbo and Teba. And this is my reward of my life. That especially once I became plant-based, I began, and since I told you I did it backwards, right? I went raw, and then I realized I was. My daughter discovered, she watched the video Earthlings, which is about animal slaughter, and she stopped eating meat right then. But I did it backwards and was vegan for a while. as I was vegan, I could begin to recognize my guilt about partaking in an industry that caused such harm. And, you know, not only to the animals themselves, but to the environment and the climate. And so I love this because this is how I always look when I'm working at the farm. Except for this last week, it was raining down terribly, and I fell into a mud puddle that was full of cow shit. It was really something, but that's this summer. And so it's really dealing with my own trauma, dealing with the trauma of having eaten meat, and realizing what it has, for me, has done to my psyche has really brought me to this. So that's all I have to say today.
Elizabeth has something.
Elizabeth, yes.
Do I need the other mic as well?
Well,
Yeah.
we need a microphone for you.
Yes, this is important. I'm glad that you brought that to me.
Some of you already got these, but September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. I work for the county, as does Scott, and part of what we do is promote mental health and mental health awareness. So these are just little free yard signs. They've got two sides to them. This one says you matter, and the other side says don't give up. There's a couple other ones over there, like that big lawn stakes. So it's just a way of spreading a little bit of positivity, a positive message, and we've been focused on mental health the last couple of weeks, so it seems appropriate, and a whole bunch of people have already taken some. If you want one, you be at the back of the library table. You're welcome to have one or more.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. And read them and apply them to yourself. Right? Take it home and put it in your room as you want to put it on your lawn. But if it's on your lawn, you can go in and you matter. You drive into your lawn, and there's a sign that says you matter. How cool is that? Or there's a sign. What are some of the others? You matter. You are enough.
Yes.
And don't give up. Okay. So imagine driving into your driveway every day and seeing the sign. You are enough. Okay. So good. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? I shut you off. Sorry.
We're very grateful for your talk tonight. Thank you. And we still have a few minutes. If I see a question in the back, you can just take your time and come up with a question or two or three, whatever works out.
And it doesn't have to be about tonight.
Yes.
Could you just elaborate on what you said about things that calm the mind and vice versa? Could you expand on that?
Well, that's this enteric nervous system and the vagus nerve, that our brain is connected to our gut, right? And so the gut has neurons in it, and the way the nervous system communicates with itself is through neurons and neurotransmitters. So if our gut is upset because we ate a hamburger, then it's going to tell the brain things aren't good down here, and the brain's going to be like, I don't know, it's okay to me, but maybe you're right, and I'll start looking around, and vice versa. So it's this two-way street between the gut and the heart, the organs down here, and the brain. Yeah.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. Serotonin was mentioned as one of the main gut hormones, and we prescribed in the past years a number of antidepressant, anti-anxiety drugs, which are serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So we have kind of a lack of serotonin if we don't feed our bacteria in our gut, the microbiome. If we don't feed them their food, they don't feed us back enough serotonin. About 70 to 90% of the serotonin in our body is produced in the gut. So what is the bacteria's food? It's the deficiency in the American diet. Fiber. Did you say fiber?
Fiber.
Yeah, very good. So fiber, and where does all fiber come from? It comes from plants. So that's one of the potential problems that can affect your mental health also if you're not eating properly. We want to talk briefly about next week.
Yeah, so next week we're going to be doing physical activity,
Kathy, you want to say hi back there?
Kathy is here.
She's a personal therapist, so she'll be leading the discussion and talk, and want to mention that. So myself and Charlie and me and one of the other members, Kristen Insmeyer, one of the cardiologists, we're going down to Los Angeles for a plant-based continuing education conference. So I guess the three of us that are here tonight will be down there. So then a week after that, kind of share with you guys at that class kind of the stuff we learned at that conference. You go to those because they're a lot of fun. It's how we're kind of forming our own tribe. It's like for us medical providers, that's like the medical providers that are in our tribe, because it's all nutrition, education, all plant-based nutrition. We get all 9 meals or there's a buffet of all food plant-based food. It's a lot of fun. So that's like our little getaway. So we'll be going to that and show that. Yes, so classes, physical activity with Kathy, Belgium. I was just mentioning that I won't be here, Charlie won't be here, everyone won't be here. But we're still in the class, come to class. And then the week after that, we'll share with you guys kind of movie conference.
And for those of you who are online, next week is going to be a skipped week for an online. This would just be an in-person class. So if you're able, next week would be a good time to actually come in person to the Grange and find out what it's all about. With that, does anyone want to share a personal story of how things are going in their life? Good, bad, whatever it might be. Before you do that, I want to share one quick inspiring moment or moments that I had this week. I was working at Volunteer Medicine, and I met a new cardiologist who just started working to volunteer his time. And he introduced himself to me and said, do you do those classes on nutrition? And I said, yes. And he says, I had heard about those classes from someone, I don't know, a physician assistant or from someone, I don't know if it's a relative or not. And he said, what are they about? So I got an opportunity to share what was going on. And he said, people that I interact with could find value with that. So the following day, he asked for a number of our cards that he could share with his patients. So I'm really thrilled that we have another interesting physician. That was kind of a highlight of my week this week. So times are changing. There is hope for the future, and you are enough. Any other stories from anybody? It's been great fun listening to you all, and Pam, that was wonderful. Thank you so very much. We're good? Next week. And if anybody wants to stay, help us break down the tables if you have the time. It takes about 10 minutes, literally, when we have help, but you don't have to. Okay, guys. Thanks for being online, and we'll catch you the next week. Hold on, I'm going to kind of end the session. It's been fun. Get around to admitting you. Oh, so some people didn't get it. Jerry. Oh, and Russell. This is they came up with that. Yeah, it came later. Is that